friends to lovers,
to kisses and cuddles,
we are doing it
God's way.
This is Stronger Together, Closer to God.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Stronger Together, Closer to God podcast. This is Minister Vernon. I'm here with the wonderful, the lovely, the talented, the awesome, phenomenal evangelist, Anya Meyer.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you all are listening to this. How's everyone doing today? Great to have you on board with us today.
So this is Think About It Thursday.
Yes.
As you know, Mondays is our motivational Mondays, and then we got some things going on with Think About It Thursdays. And the purpose of these Think About It Thursdays is that we're applying what God's word is saying in our lives in every way. And we're talking about our temple, the body that God has blessed us with. We are to be the managers and the caretakers of our bodies. And that means not just physically, that's emotionally, mentally, and spiritually.
Yeah.
And so this Think About It idea came and downloaded into us. And you're going to hear us sometimes say loves and lovies. Loves. Tell us a little bit more about this Think About It Thursday for this month.
Well, Think About It Thursday for this month came actually because of my own health. I had a little health crisis scare last month. And last month, which was February, was cardiovascular rock the red for cardiovascular for heart disease and things like that. So God downloaded in my spirit. He's like, hey, we as women really need to take better care of ourselves. We're always nurturing and taking care of our husbands, our children, being caregivers to our parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents. We need to do a better job of taking care of our temple ourselves. And because it is Women's History Month, I was like, wow, God, what a perfect month for this. Not only is it Women's History Month, but it is Kidney Awareness Month.
Yes.
Kidney awareness is near and dear to our hearts. We rock our kidney awareness paraphernalia and we wear green for my mom, not only my mom, but many others that are dealing with kidney disease.
Yes, absolutely. And so we have a special guest that's with us today who's going to really just break this down for us, not just because she's in this field and educating many others about the importance of taking care and maintaining your temple, and especially in the areas of your kidneys, but she actually has walked through this herself. So, Loves, you want to do the introduction?
Yeah, I'm just so excited and delighted, and my heart is full because we met this beautiful young lady. It's been some years ago. Actually, my husband knew her prior to me meeting her, and then we met her at a conference, a nonprofit conference, and it just blessed me at that time because we were walking. My mom hadn't been diagnosed, but she was really, in the thick of things. And it was God's divine timing and his order for us to meet up. So I'm just going to read a little bit about her. I just wanted to share, how we got to know one another, and I feel like she's definitely a sister in the Lord, a sister in Christ to both of us. But this beautiful spirit is passionate, unique, loyal, resilient. These words are commonly used to describe Sharron S. Rouse. Sharron is an experienced leader with a demonstrated history of working in the education and nonprofit industries. She is skilled in program coordination, leadership, community outreach, and curriculum development. Sharron is a strong educational professional with an administrator certification force in education, leadership, and administration. A native of the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, she has dedicated her life to influencing the world as a kidney disease, dialysis, and now, praise God, I'm sorry, getting full, now a transplant survivor.
Yes.
To God be the glory.
Yes.
I just stopped there. Beautiful, just beautiful. Sharron actively shares her story to bring hope and healing to anyone facing difficult circumstances in life, to expand the scope of her reach. Sharron founded Kindness for Kidney International Incorporated, a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating, encouraging, and empowering kidney warriors and their families. Sharron lives in Maryland with her husband, Sean, and her daughter, Kayla. I hope that I pronounced that correctly.
Kyla.
Kyla. I'm sorry. Well, I shed some tears. Yes. Without further ado, take it away.
Wow. It's too early for that, Anya. It's too early for that. It is an honor and a privilege. I definitely feel the presence of God here in this interview. And so when you started with the tears, I was like, no, I haven't even started yet. No.
I'm a water bucket.
It's okay. I understand. God bless you both for what you're doing for the community, how you're strengthening marriages, and just the blessing that you all are. Your story really inspires me. And so I appreciate the opportunity for being able to come on and share my story and just share how Kindness for Kidneys was founded. I always say this was God's vision, and I'm just here to walk it out. And so thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure's all ours.
Yes. To God be the glory.
Yes. And I want to put this caveat in, because sometimes I know my men will sometimes hear what we're talking about and kind of be like, oh, well, this is focused on women. No, I want you to understand this is focused on everybody.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of being in the presence of a man who went home to be with the Lord, but during a season and the time, he battled some of these situations with his kidneys, and he took us through a journey of the typical day that he walked through. So, and besides, men, I want to emphasize to you, you may have a daughter, you may have a sister, you may have an aunt, a grandmother, a woman in your life that might be going through this. So let's get better educated, better aware, so that we can be the best support system for them as well. And even for ourselves, with our health as well.
Yeah. So what would you like us and the podcast family to know about you? I know we shared your bio, but just give us a little history about yourself.
Absolutely. So I am from the Washington metropolitan area, born and raised in Maryland. And, the biggest thing, honestly, when I think about bios and all of that, the only thing really that matters to me is that I'm a believer and that I'm a child of God. Like when people see me, that's what I want them to know. Like that, to me, that's the only thing that matters. Yes, I have bio and things that I've done, and I will talk about that, for the sake of the podcast. But I'm really on this journey of, when we think about our identity, a lot of times we put it into the things that are around us, the people that are around us, what we do. But really, I just feel like the most important thing in my life is that I'm a child of God. And when I identify with something bigger than myself, all this other stuff is just, and I think it goes with saying that when we identify in those things, sometimes, and what I've been learning in this season, especially during COVID, because God had asked me to step down, and this is kind of a sidebar, but I just want to share it because I feel led to share it. God had asked me to kind of disassociate with things that I had previously disassociated with. He didn't say forever, but in this season, because of some of the things that he's doing in my life, he asked me to disassociate with those things. And I know it was because I needed to examine whether those things were idols. He wanted to see where my heart was too. And so I've been going through this process during the pandemic because I saw a lot of people who are identifying themselves with the things that are around them and with the things that they do. And what happens is when you do that and those things are no longer there, you're kind of left out there and you don't know who you are. And so I see why he was taking me through that journey, because even as I grow, as Kindness for Kidneys grows, those things are great. But at the end of the day, if I don't have my identity in him, I can get lost in that. I can get lost in the applause and, I'm this and I'm that. And it's really not about me. And so when you ask, like, who are you? That's the thing that resonates the most. I'm a child of God, and everything else that comes from that is a result of my relationship with him. And so I was born and raised here in the Washington metropolitan area. I've spent the last 20 years in education, starting out as a classroom teacher and then school counselor, instructional specialist, Title I coordinator. And I had the pleasure of meeting Vernon and in education. We worked together in Title I. And then in this past June, God had called me off the job. And it's been a true journey just walking through this experience with him. It was definitely a faith walk. still on the faith walk, but I understand now why I needed to be off my job so that he could do what he needed to do in me as I move forward. In 2006, I was diagnosed with kidney disease. I was a young mom, had just had my daughter 5 months before, woke up one day to go to school. At that time, I was a school counselor. I woke up to go to school, to go to work, and I had swollen legs. I'd never really experienced swelling like that. I mean, up until that point, I was relatively healthy. I did have a diagnosis of lupus in 2003. Never really felt like I had lupus. Like, I know it's not about how you feel necessarily, but they diagnosed it, but lupus can be very complicated to diagnose. And so when I got the diagnosis, at the time, my symptoms were swelling in my hands and fatigue. And in hindsight, I kind of feel like it was the kidney stuff all along. But, they said, well, your ANA numbers were saying something different. So, I haven't had any symptoms related to lupus since that time. So fast forward to 2006, after I woke up with swollen legs, the thought was, when I got to the emergency room, well, if you had a lupus diagnosis in 2003, this is probably lupus related. And so you just had a child 5 months ago. Sometimes your body will turn on itself and it'll start to attack different organs. And so they said, that's probably what's happening. Well, they did the biopsy and that wasn't what was happening. They diagnosed me with focal segmental glomerular sclerosis. And it's where segments of your kidney cells and the filtering system in your kidneys, the nephrons, become scarred. So I never heard of it. I didn't have any background knowledge as far as someone in my family having kidney disease or anything like that, or anyone being on dialysis. So this was completely new to myself, my husband, our entire family. And so at that time, I decided to resign and focus on my health. I didn't know what I was walking into, and so that's how my journey began with kidney disease. It completely caught me off guard. It's almost like I got hit with a Mack truck, because you wake up, you have your plan for your day, you're going to work, you're doing what you feel you're called to do in that season. And I really, really enjoyed being a school counselor. That was probably my all-time favorite job. And so then to be hit with this in the middle of being a mom, and it was a lot. And I'm like, God, what in the world, And so I ended up in the hospital for 8 days, and God kind of prepared me for the journey ahead. He shared with me some things that were to come. And basically he said, this is not going to be a short journey. And so he prepared me for the things that were to come. So when you ask me who I am, bottom line is I am a believer and I'm a child of God.
Love that. Love that. Wow. You poured so much into us just in that little segment. We're going to have you come back on here about that faith walk and entrepreneurship, because I loved what you said about, because being a believer first and foremost, but then also how we can get so caught up. I was watching something the other day about, and they were talking about, I think it was more about men in their titles, not so much as women, because I think us as women, we already wear so many titles: mother, doctor, lawyer, nurse, whatever the case may be. I don't think we get as caught up in it as men do, to a degree, but we can. And that just blessed me so, because I'm in a season too where, like you said, God had began to have you disassociate yourself with certain things. Not to say that it's forever. And he uses any and everybody. So he just used you this morning to speak directly to me. I'm pretty sure others are listening. He spoke to them too. But yes, that was beautiful. Wow. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it really is. So when we think about our lives in Christ, there's death that has to come with that. And that's where I am, I am dying to me so that he can live through me. The more puffed up I am, the less space he has to dwell and do what he needs to do. And so it's a difficult process. Like, this process has been very difficult because, when you have to let people go or things like that, it hurts. It's like, God, I love these people. Like, why can't they be in my life right now? But he knows the end from the beginning. So he knows where he's taking me. And so it's very important to him. And it's not to say that I may not reconnect with some of those people or things like that in the future, but for right now, for this space, he's preparing. And I feel like he's preparing us for the days ahead. You know, he talks about gross darkness coming on this earth. And if we aren't confident in who we are in him, we won't be able to stand. And that's what he's been showing me. Like if your identity is in this house car, you know, just all of the things around you, you're going to faint in the day of adversity. And so your identity can only be found in me. And that's the only way you'll be able to be a light when as darkness continues to spread, you know. And so it is a dying to self, but that's what he's called us to do. He says that, you know, one that loses his life gains it, you know, and that's what our walk is about. It's about dying to us so that he can then have room to do what he needs to do in and through us. And so that's where this journey has led me. And it made me understand why, yes, I had to come off my job, because he really needed to do an inner work and he needed my attention. You know, I was so caught up in life and we worked really hard. And I know Vernon can contest in education. I mean, oh my goodness, it's a lot and you work very hard. And so I see how that could have been a distraction from the work that he really needed to do before sending me out to do the next thing.
Yeah. Amen. Wow. Just, whoo. You're on fire this morning. I tell you, we have you on here for one thing, but you're preaching, sister. You're preaching. Yeah. Definitely. Did you want to say something?
I was just going to say it's that pruning process. Yeah. You know, sometimes we think pruning is a bad thing, but if we remind ourselves, if we ever see people, gardeners and landscapers, when they go around, they trim their pruning for a purpose to keep the growth growing within that plant. And it's the same way with us. God wants us in those moments of times. He's going to prune us. And sometimes, as I learned from Bruce Wilkinson, his book, Dream Giver, he talked about that there are moments in times where God will ask us, if this is the calling I'm asking you to do, I need you to surrender something in return. And that can be the hardest part, like you were saying, Sharron, dying to self. You know, I had that similar experience when I had to step away from the education field, as my dad needed the care he needs. He was like, which one you going to choose? You know, you going to choose me, or you going to choose the other option? And that was it could be the hardest morning.
It's hard.
But it's so grateful of a decision when you follow God, because you feel the peace, you feel the serenity, and you know that what you have done has been aligned with his purpose, his mission, and his vision. He said, it doesn't mean it is probably removed from you. It's just a season right now. I love what you said. This is a season like winter. Winter is typically the time when things are removed from the trees, the leaves are removed, you know, and everything else. It doesn't mean it's the end. It just means there's a preparation for a new beginning, which is our spring and our summer.
Absolutely. You know. Yeah. No, it definitely touched home for us, I think, as a couple. And as we go forward in our journey with what God is calling us to do. And because it can get difficult, it can get challenging, especially, I know you said something the other day to me about checking my heart. And I kind of got a little offended by it. And God was like, no, don't get offended. Listen to what he's telling you. And it was God speaking through him to have me check myself, you know, about going back into the medical field and what's the real reason for me going back. And
then like you said, Sharron, is that ending up being an idol instead of God's purpose? Because sometimes certain things that we will pursue, we thinking we're doing God's work, but we end up following an idol that God's not approved of. Yeah.
So thank you for that. It touched me. Like I said, God uses whomever he wants to, especially when you're seeking him for an answer. You talked about, you know, your diagnosis and what led you up. And you said you were a young mom. How old were you? I think you said your baby was 5 months. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes, she was 5 months. I was 31 years old at the time of the diagnosis. And so, it was just like, okay, you know, and at one point when they had diagnosed me with lupus, they were like, well, you know, with the lupus, you may not have kids. They had given all these negative reports. And so, you know, I'm like, I felt like Abraham, like, No, was it wait a minute, Isaac. Which one sacrificed? God asked him to sacrifice. Was it Isaac?
Isaac.
Isaac. Yeah. So I felt like, God, here I am. I have this baby and now I'm sick. What? No, 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 no. And so, yeah, I was 31 years old. She was 5 months. And that was part of the reason why, I was happy that he told me to come off of my job, because trying to now deal with this new diagnosis and not knowing what would come of the diagnosis, like what would manifest itself in my body, if there would be more swelling or, just whatever. He said, you need to let this go and focus on your family and your health.
Yeah. Well, bless God, you were obedient and you listened to his instructions. Definitely. You talked about you were in the hospital for 8 days. What was your experience like in the hospital? And if you don't mind sharing, what were some of the things that were going on at that time?
So when I was in the hospital, so I started out here in the area, and then my doctor had me transferred to Hopkins, just wanted me to get better care than what I was getting. And so it was very interesting. I'd never been in the hospital for something like that. Like I didn't, and so I learned very on that I had to be my own advocate. I had to understand. So you think you're in the hospital, and it's because this was my first time. I'm just listening to what they're telling me. If they came in with medication, I took it. If they came in with a needle, I took it. And so, but one thing, God always would have angels in the hospital, like that he would just send in, even if it's in the middle of the night and maybe it's a nurse that's assigned to my shift. And she would come in, and one particular night, a nurse came in and she said, "Why are you taking heparin?" And I wasn't clear on what I was being given, which is not a good thing. And two, she said, did you know that they typically give heparin to people that are bedridden, that aren't able to walk, to help with their circulation? And I said, no, I didn't know that, and so all of these, prior to that, when they would come in at night, and the nurse would give me a shot in my stomach, and it was a shot of heparin. And she said, the next time someone comes in here, don't take it. And so that kind of, I was like, really? Like, I can do that? I can say no, and I'm not saying that I said no about everything, but she was just saying to me, I just felt like that was an angel coming in to say, you don't need to take this. And it opened my eyes to the fact that, Sharron, one, you're not in here just to receive care from them. You need to be an active participant in your health. And then also, like, find out what they are giving you and why. Like, you need to ask questions. So when you think about going to a doctor, you're like, well, they're the expert. I'm just going to come in here and they'll tell me what to do, and I'll do it. And that I learned that shouldn't be the relationship. It should be you knowing how you feel, because you bring that aspect of it. And then the doctor, with the medical expertise that he or she has, bringing that, and together we're coming up with the best solution for me. So when we talk about individualized approaches, that's how we do it. A lot of times there's a standard of care for everyone, and that may not be the best option for everyone. So the important thing to note here is that as a patient in a hospital, you play just as much of a role in your care as the doctor does. And that's when I learned that, because when I first got in there, whatever they were coming in to give, I took it. I didn't ask questions. I didn't research on my own, like, let me look up what this is and what the side effects are, and how this is going to treat me. But God would place angels that would say, do you know what you're taking this for? And so she said, you don't need heparin. Aren't you up walking around throughout the day? And I was like, yeah. And she said, yeah, you don't need heparin. And so the next day when the nurse came in, I said, I'm not going to take heparin. So the biggest thing I learned being there was you really do have to advocate for yourself. That was an eye opener for me, because I was in there like just buying the time, like, okay, figure out what's going on so I can go home, and so we played just as much of a role in our care as the person that's trained to do it. So, but together with my lived experience and their expertise, then we can come up with the best solution for me. But it starts with me advocating for myself. I can't expect to come into a situation. So it was very interesting, but it was very educational. And that was the beginning of me understanding the importance of advocacy, the importance of being my biggest advocate, because I couldn't expect for them to, one, know how I was feeling. And then two, I couldn't expect for them to just come in and do all the work. They have the expertise. I'm living the experience. And then together we work together to figure out the best options for me.
I love that. I love what you said about being an advocate. And yeah, you don't have to take all the medications that they're suggesting that you take. And it's great that, God bless, he's good. He, like you said, he sends angels throughout, just to kind of share a little bit about my mom's story. And we were her advocates for her because she battled for quite some time trying to get answers. And she was, like you said, she was swelling, fatigue. She was short of breath. I mean, she just had a lot of the symptoms. She was going through to her nephrologist and everything. And he kept saying he was preparing her for dialysis. And I know we're going to get to the dialysis part in a little bit, but hers was, 2:00 in the morning, she would call us and we'd have to take her to the ER because she just was that sick. And she would tell us, I remember the last time we took her to the ER, she told us, she says, I can't even lay down because I can just feel like fluid going throughout my body. And my mom's body was shutting down when we took her to the ER. And I never forget the doctor, the hospitalist, because the ER was, they would say, oh, she has a bladder infection, which she probably did because, she was going through a lot. My mom has kidney disease due to diabetes, high levels of diabetes. So that's why she is where she is today with chronic kidney disease. But the hospitalist, thank God for him, she cried, she begged because the ER was getting ready to send her back home. And she cried to the hospitalist, and God bless him, he was a Ethiopian gentleman of Ethiopian descent. And she looked him in the eyes. She said, please don't send me back home. She says, I am sick. I am so sick. And I can't even count how many times my mom just went back and forth to the doctors, to the ER, and her nephrologist was just like, oh, we're preparing you for dialysis. It's not time. So I just thank God for the hospitalist to say, no, we're not going to send you home. We're going to keep you overnight and we're going to run some tests and do some things. And I think my mom might have been in the hospital for 2 days. They put a port in her and started her dialysis. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're just resetting the room right now. Just in case any of you have joined our podcast, we are on with Sharron and we're just talking about kidney disease and the impact of it because it is National Kidney Disease Awareness Month. And just to give you just some quick facts, and we're going to continue with these Q&As because this is phenomenal how God has used Sharron to do in her life to now become an advocate for others, to educate other people what to be aware of. And I'm just getting this from the Kidney Foundation's website that 1 in 3 Americans are at risk for kidney disease. 37 million people have chronic kidney disease. 660,000 people live with kidney failure, and there are 100,000 people who are waiting for a kidney transplant.
Wow.
So this is a topic, and from what I'm seeing, and Sharron, you correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of times we don't even find out that the area that's a concern is the kidneys, because this is one of those symptoms. Obviously certain things happen with the heart. We can identify the heart. Something happens with our breathing, we can identify something's going on with the lungs, but with kidney, it can kind of sometimes be under the radar of being discovered.
Yes. And sometimes sometimes it is referred to being a silent killer, a silent disease, because a lot of times you can have it because a lot of times stages 1 through 3, you won't see any symptoms. You may just feel like you're tired because you're tired, and so you don't necessarily feel like something is wrong with you. And in my case, I may have had it. And I think back even to college, which would have been 20 years prior to my diagnosis, maybe less than 20 years, but that I was spilling protein in my urine, and they would just kind of brush it off like, oh, it's just a trace. Sometimes that happens with labs. When I would go for my annual physical, it would just be, oh, it's a trace. It's a trace of protein. And I never really went on any further to research what that could have meant, but in hindsight, it could have been the kidney disease all along. And it doesn't lie dormant. It lies dormant, and you don't really see any side effects until it's towards stage 4 and 5. And so that's why it's important to make sure you monitor your blood pressure, your blood sugar. Diabetes and high blood pressure are the number one causes of kidney disease and kidney failure. And so it's important to monitor and really get a feel for where you are. If you're tired, or if you're laying down, like in your mom's case, and you feel you can't breathe, like you feel fluid, that's a sign that, something isn't, because the kidneys are supposed to filter fluid and send it to where it needs to go, and create the urine for you to release it. And so if it's still staying in there, that there may be something going on with how your kidneys are filtering the fluid. And so it's so important to be aware, to look for those signs. If you're extremely tired, like more than usual, it's usually something else going on, whether it's kidney disease or something else. But if you're more tired, you can barely function, things like that, there's something else there. And sometimes, like you said, you have to pry and sometimes beg, like, because doctors, they're seeing all these patients coming in, and so they're just trying to triage you and get you to where you need to go. Okay, you can go home, you can do this, take this, do this. So then, it's up to us to advocate. That just speaks to my point. It's so vital that you advocate for yourself, because you know how you feel, and you're like, no, I'm not going home. Something isn't right. And that will force them to do the extra steps of what they need to do to look a little deeper. For me, I think back, because I had a doctor's appointment where I had labs done prior to me getting this diagnosis. And I remember my labs, my creatinine levels, which is what they typically look for to see how your kidneys are function, they were within normal range. And that was just 2 weeks before, so it showed up like that. When I was in the hospital, then it had gone up to 3.9. And so it can happen very quickly. And so when I saw the swelling, in my mind, I'm like, well, I'm going to go to work still. I felt okay. But no, if you have swelling in your legs, there's fluid in there, and you need to get somewhere before that goes to your heart or anything like that. And so advocacy is, if I didn't learn anything else from my journey, it was the importance of advocating for myself, and the importance of speaking up when I feel like, no, I shouldn't go home, as in your mom's case.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Cause like you said, it happened so fast. Like her creatinine and bun was just, and she was going back and forth to the emergency room, to her nephrologist, the doctors. And like I said, they kept saying they were preparing her for dialysis. I'm like, okay, so, but advocacy is so important. And with us saying that, what do you think are some good or challenging things that you've experienced or others have experienced? Because you've worked with so many others with the healthcare system, as far as, because we're talking about kidney awareness, the challenges that you've received, like we were saying with my mom, they kept sending her back home. Like you said, with advocacy, what do you think are some things that we need to continue to push for?
Yeah. So when it comes to advocacy, sometimes you do have to seek second and third opinions. I always suggest that to people. Like, if you know something is going on and you're not getting the answers, and you've gone back and you've asked questions, you've done your own research, and nothing's being resolved, you may have to look into another provider, or just going to that person for a second opinion. And so I went to several other doctors, even with my diagnosis, and I read up on it, of course, with Google and WebMed and some of those other sites that you can go to for information. But I also went and saw some other doctors, and one of them was in New York. I was like, well, I just want answers. So I found out that Alonzo Mourning, who also had FSGS, I went to see his doctor. I was like, I want to go see his doctor. Like, I want other opinions so that we can decide on what's best for me. So seeking other opinions. I know health insurance can be an issue sometimes. And so seeking resources for insurance, what they're going to cover, what they're not going to cover, is important. And that's an area that I hear people complaining about, depending on your insurance, of course, because I was in the school system, I had pretty good insurance, but I know that's not the situation for everyone. And so it's important to really check with your insurance to see what's allowable, what's not, whether you need to add, Medicare, onto that, or, just kind of navigating through that. That can be a challenge. But one of the biggest challenges is being sure that you have the right diagnosis going on. And sometimes that requires going to see multiple doctors. And it's not to say that we discount or disrespect the medical field. Like we respect their expertise, but not every situation is the same. And I think, because of how we do medicine here in our country, it's kind of like, well, this is the standard of care. This is what we do for everyone. And that doesn't always work. And so it's important to be aware and to ask questions. And if you know within yourself that something still isn't right, to maybe go and find a second opinion from someone else. And I mean, with the internet, it's so easy nowadays you can Google nephrologist near me, or nephrologist, and they will pull up a list and you can kind of read some reviews to know, okay, maybe we should check this person out. Maybe they're specialized in glomerular diseases. So in my case, they even have doctors now that are specialized in FSGS, so that if I am seeing my nephrologist, who just generally takes care of people that are in all walks of health as far as kidney disease, but I want to see someone that's specific to FSGS, I could go and see that person as well and add them as a part of my care team. And then also not discounting alternative methods. So there were times that I would go to get acupuncture. That was helpful in me just getting some rest at night, because sometimes when you're going through kidney disease, you experience insomnia, or just so many things going on, you can't sleep. And so alternative methods, aqua chi, acupuncture, just exploring some of those things, maybe taking some supplements that won't have as many harmful side effects as some of the regular medications that they provide. And of course, you have those conversations with your doctor. Like, I'm on several supplements, even today, that help with other areas that are a result of the medication I take for my transplant. So but I have that conversation with my doctor. He kind of looks at the ingredients. He's like, okay, it's fine. But they're plant-based supplements that I take to help with my health, my overall health. And so it's important to seek out alternative methods. Sometimes there may be some other options that work for you.
Great. That's great. And a sneak peek on alternative medication. The last Thursday of this month, we're going to have a special guest coming on to talk about some holistic and alternative medicines or medications or ways of life. And acupuncture is one of them, and some other natural things that we can attest from. Mm-hmm. With regards to looking after your health, what type of support did you get from your family? I can't wait for you to share the part of the transplant, but we'll get to that. Community or social groups.
So I'm blessed to come from a tight-knit family. And so the support that they've given me through the journey, of course, my husband, he took me to every doctor's appointment. He was there just as a listening ear whenever I needed to talk or vent, or he saw the whole journey, all the frustration. He would take myself and even my sister, when she was getting her workups done, he would take her as well. So I had his support, even with meals, coming back and forth from dialysis. By the time I started dialysis, my daughter was 6 years old. So my mom and family members jumped in to help if she needed to be picked up. My mother-in-law, she would pick her up from school and make sure she had her homework and everything done. And I always tell people it really does take a village. And sometimes, maybe you're living in the area and you don't have family here. Sometimes you may have to create that village through attending a support group, or, just getting some resources from your local community services, community centers. Sometimes you have to create that group, but it really does. It's not something you want to go at alone, because it can be a very lonely journey anyway. But when you isolate yourself, it makes it even more difficult to endure. And so social groups, like support groups, we do have a support group that we host, but there are other resources out there that even if it's going out to dance, or just something, an art class, or you want to take advantage of some of those things that you may like to do. There's mall walking programs where you can just go and walk in the mall, so connecting with outside resources to help you mentally, because the mental part is the biggest part in the health journey. Your body follows where your mind is. And so making sure you keep your mental health. I feel like a lot of times we focus on the physical health, our physical bodies, what we're feeling, the pain and all of that, but sometimes taking care of the mental pieces help with the physical. And so those were some of the supports that I used, my family, of course, and then connecting with outside organizations. I was still working full time during my journey, so my coworkers were a sense of support. I was very mindful about who I shared my journey with. So there were only a few people that really knew what I was going through. It's so interesting when I was getting ready to have the transplant, they kind of gave me a little something, and they had cake and they had gift cards and things, and people had no idea that I was going through that. And it was because I was very, very careful about who I shared what with, because sometimes, depending on, and everyone has their own journeys with their faith and things like that. But I was so focused on what I was believing for that I didn't want anything to distract me. And so the more, sometimes when everybody knows, it's just, and everybody has an opinion about what you're going through, that can cloud what you're believing God for. And so I told the people that needed to know, but not everyone knew that I was on dialysis. I had the favor of God there, because the assistant superintendent at the time, she told me, just leave and go get your treatment. It's okay. Don't take leave. You don't have to take leave or anything. And so I could leave like an hour and a half early on Tuesdays and Thursdays so I could go to get my treatment. So that was a part of my village too, just taking care of the little things like that, of making sure that I could leave work without having to exhaust all of my leave every Tuesday and Thursday to go for my treatments. And so when I think of support, there's so many areas that's just step in to help. And one thing, you have to be open to that. Some people, and I know some people that are very ashamed of their journey, so they don't share. And so that kind of blocks some of the support. Some of those people may have some answers for you. So it's good to be mindful and prayerful about who you share with, because you never know who may have some support systems in place that could help you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I know you said you were diagnosed and was in the hospital for 8 days. And then I know you didn't like realize all this the other part of your journey. I know you said that God prepared you for it. Did you realize right away after your hospital stay that you would have to go on dialysis? Did they talk to you about dialysis then, or was it later on that, you discovered that you had to start dialysis?
So it was later on. When I got the diagnosis in 2006, they put me on heavy dosages of immunosuppressant medicine. And the idea was to suppress my immune system so that my immune system couldn't attack my kidneys and cause further damage. And so steroids, I was on a heavy dose of steroids. I mean, I had a big old face and, steroids are wow. And so I was on 60 milligrams of prednisone coming out of the hospital, as well as Cellcept, which is immunosuppressant medication. And I was on that for a while. I experienced a lot of discomfort with it. So they slowly tapered me off, and I would say after about a year or so, because I was losing a lot of weight. I couldn't hold food down. What I found out later on, now I know that I was on the dose that they prescribed was too much for my body. Maybe someone that was 300 pounds, maybe a stronger guy or something could have handled it. But in hindsight, I realized it's because, and they were trying to be aggressive. So I understand why they prescribed it. But in hindsight, I realized it's because it was way too much. I was on like 3,000 milligrams of one of the medication, and it was just way too much. So they tapered me off of that. I was able to be off of medication for about 3 years. And then in 2011, my numbers started to creep back up. Creatinine was starting to creep up. The protein was starting to spill in the urine. Those numbers were going up. And so that's when the conversation about dialysis started. And my doctor, he wanted to start me on peritoneal dialysis, which is a dialysis that you do at home. You connect the catheter in your stomach and you connect to a machine, or you can do it manually, like through IV bags. And so I was in denial at that point. I said, I'm not going on dialysis. I'm not doing this. And I went to see a whole bunch of naturopathic doctors. I was doing aqua chi and just all kinds of stuff. I was juicing. I did everything that I could to slow it down, and it helped a little bit, but the numbers just kept trending up. And he even set up an appointment for me to get the catheter in my stomach, because it does take some time for that to heal before you can use it. And then you have to go through the training of how to use it. And he set up an appointment and I didn't show up. And, this is where I really began to experience God in a different way, where faith is concerned, because my confession was, this is not God's will concerning me. Dialysis is not God's will concerning me. And I ended up in a hospital again, because I began to retain fluid again. And by this point, my doctor's like, okay, we've made you these appointments to get the catheter. You haven't shown up. You've been saying, let me try this, but your numbers are still increasing. And so I had gone to see another doctor for a second opinion. And he said, well, yeah, you're there. He said, you may have a few more weeks, maybe a month, but you really need to be considering this. But when he did my labs, my hemoglobin was so low. It was at, I think, like a 5. And he was shocked that the day that he called me to tell me my test results, I was in a math training. And he's like, you're at work? Like, how are you even functioning with the hemoglobin this low? And I knew I felt very tired, but I just thought, I know what's going on with my body right now. So I ended up in the hospital. And as a result of that, I got the blood transfusion because, hemoglobin was low. And while I was there, he said, please consider going on dialysis, because your body's not in a good place right now. And I had an encounter with God in the hospital in that moment, because I was disappointed that, here I'm doing everything that I knew possible to prevent this. And I feel like I have faith. God, where are you? And I had an encounter with him, and he said, you're being selfish. And he said, you are thinking about Sharron. You're thinking about what you're going to have to endure when you go to the dialysis facility, but you're not considering. And he basically told me, Sharron, just because you go on dialysis, it doesn't mean that my word doesn't stand as the final authority. You're still healed, but you're equating going on dialysis with not being healed. And it just really changed my perspective. He said, you don't know who may be sitting in that dialysis facility that may not ever step foot in a church, and if we say that we are the church, then that means be the church. And so really, I mean, I can't even describe what I felt and the turning point in my journey, just being in the hospital that night. I mean, and he just talked to me just like a friend, like, you're really being selfish here. And a lot of times as believers, we're like, God, whatever you want to do, here I am, send me, God, I'll go where you tell me to go. I'll say what you want me to say. But what if that means sitting in a dialysis chair on my behalf? Then what? So it really changed my perspective on faith, and even my responsibility as a believer. This walk is going to cost you something. And that was my takeaway. And so the next day when the doctors came in, I was so rejuvenated and focused on the journey ahead. Like, I get to be his representative, and this is what it means to be his representative. He assured me, Sharron, you're already healed. This is just a part of the process. And so, it really changed my perspective. And I think that was a turning point even in my journey, because I knew that it was bigger than me at that point. So again, it was another part of dying to the fact that I was going to be connected to a machine with my blood running in and out of my body. It was a dying to me so that I could sit in proxy for God in that facility, and he could use me. Now, if I was concerned with myself going in there, it probably wouldn't have been able to be used the way that he was able to use me in that facility to impact the dialysis technicians and other patients that were around me. But I knew that was the turning point, I feel, in the journey, to know that this is so much bigger than you. All I need you to do is be the body, be my hands and my feet and my mouthpiece. This is bigger than you. And so when he came in the next day, I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. My mind was so focused on, wow, like the revelation that I got in that moment, that I get to be a partaker in what he's already done. It just really changed my mindset about my journey. Not to say that it was easy throughout the dialysis journey at all, but I knew what he told me in the hospital. And so he prepared me to be able to sit in that chair, knowing that this is not the end. Like, this is not, you're not going to die from this, but I do need to use you in a greater way. And part of that meant me decreasing so that he could have room to do the work that he needed to do. And so that's how I got to the dialysis chair. I started dialysis. That next week, they hooked me up with the center, and day that they put the catheter in, they started dialysis right away. And so they have, if you wait to the last minute like me, or if there's an emergency and maybe you crash into dialysis, they'll start you with a catheter in your chest, because that, as soon as they do the surgery, they can start doing the dialysis. So that's how I started out. And they connected me with the local center, and I went on Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays for about 4 hours.
Your testimony is absolutely beautiful. And I love what you said about, just being an ambassador, because my mom struggles about, why me? Why did I have to be the one to have this disease? And, it's hard being on the other side, trying to encourage that person to, why not you, and she struggles with it. She's at dialysis right now. You and her have same days, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturdays, and she's there for 4 hours. And she has her moments of, why me? And I'm like, Mom, you don't know who God is going to have you come encounter with, and you could be that inspiration. She's met several friends. It's an older lady that her and my mom they're very close to one another. The lady is much older, and she's been on dialysis for 20 some years, but they're an encourager for one another. Some days when the sweet lady's not having a good day, my mom is an encourager, and vice versa. And I said, Mom, we don't know why, but God knows why. And just be open and continue to allow him to use you, because he is using you, not only to those, strangers around you, but to us as family, to take better good care of our health, and signs to look out for ourselves and children and grandchildren and things like that. We're talking about the dialysis part. Was there anything else that you would like to share with the audience about your journey with dialysis before we get to the transplant part?
I would say, in addition to what you've shared and what I've shared, it is not an easy process. Like, I can so relate with your mom, and it can be a lonely experience. Even though you're sitting in a room with a lot of other people, it can just be a very lonely experience. And it gives you time to really sit and think, and really reflect on your life. And it can be very lonely. It can be very lonely. And so that's what fuels my work, because I think about how I felt sitting there, and it really just charges me even more to continue the work, continue to spread awareness, continue to spread hope, and let people know this isn't the end of your story. Like, you're there for a reason, and there are times you are going to say, why me? I used to say sometimes, God, why do I have to be the test dummy? Like, come on, but what an opportunity as well, because I know, because of my experiences, God forbid if anybody in my family or my friends experience this, I have a wealth of knowledge that I can pour into them. And so it's not for naught that I was in that chair. God knew he had a greater purpose. It was just about me coming alongside with him to share in what he was doing. And sometimes we get stuck in how we feel, that it's hard to do that. It really is a dying to you. It really is a dying to you. I think about when it was time for him to go on his cross, and even he had some doubts, like, God, wait a minute, let this cup pass from me. Like, what is going on here? I don't know about this. And so, but he said, nevertheless. And that's the kind of attitude that we have to have about our journeys, whether it's on dialysis, whether it's on chemo, whatever it is. nevertheless, because it's always something greater that maybe we don't see happening. There are a lot of things that take place in the spiritual realm that we don't know are going on. And so we have to trust that God has already gone and prepared everything for us. It's not a surprise that I ended up on dialysis to him. He already knew, so it's about coming alongside of him for a story that was already written before the foundation of the earth. And so just as far as dialysis, it's just, you never know. And then I do want to say you have options. So there's hemodialysis where you can be in the center. You can also do it at home. And then peritoneal dialysis is done at home as well. And there you could do a manual, what's called manual, where it's kind of like IV bag, and you're doing an exchange of pulling the bad fluids out. Well, putting in the good stuff to pull out the bad stuff. Or you can do a continuous peritoneal dialysis where you connect at night to the machine, and the treatment goes on while you're asleep, and then you disconnect throughout the day, and you're free. So I did transition to doing peritoneal after about a year of being on hemo. And so I did peritoneal for about 7 months before the transplant. And that was better because I was working full time. So I just did it at night while I slept, disconnected, and I didn't have to worry about it during the day. It's also better for your body because you're doing it every day as opposed to the 3 times a week. When you go 3 times a week, it's almost like you're shocking your body each time. And so you just have to do what works best for you. Some people prefer to go to the center. They're like, I don't want all that stuff in my house, and I'm nervous about that. So some people do it that way. Some people do nocturnal dialysis. There are centers that allow you to come in at night to do your treatment, especially if you're working during the day. So they're different. You do have options, and sometimes those options aren't always given. And so it's important to know that, if this particular method isn't working, then maybe I can think about doing another method.
Thank you for sharing those different methods, because everyone that's listening may not know that, they think that, and I know they go over it with you and things like that. But yeah, my mom she's at a center. My aunt, my father's sister, she also was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease, and she actually opted to do it at home. And she loved being able to be home in her own environment. And like you said, sometimes having to do the exchange, daily versus going 3 times a week, it is different to your body. Because I know my mom, when she comes home from dialysis, she can tell certain days where they pull more fluid off of her, she's extremely tired or just not feeling well. And that's a lot to the body in that short period of time. So yeah, thank you so much.
I was going to ask a question to you, Sharron. In the midst of this process, as you're going through the dialysis and everything, I love what you said. It's not just about your body, but it's your mind. How did your diet change as a result of that? Because that's one of the other factors that I know my wife goes through at times in her conversations with my mom, is that your mind starts to go back to those things that you crave for, that you used to eat. How was that process for you, and what did you do to really transform your mind and really say, I need you to line up with the Spirit and line up that we need to adjust our eating habits if we're really going to continue to do God's will and purpose in our call?
Right.
It was definitely a process. Even things that are healthy that the typical person could eat, when you're on dialysis, you can't. And so that was very difficult, trying to sort through, okay, can I cook the spinach, or can I, it's like certain things, depending on whether you cooked it or not, you could have, or did you boil the potatoes down all the way? Just all of these things. So it was a process, and slowly but surely, it also helped my family as well, because, when my husband would cook, he had to keep that in mind of what I could eat and what I couldn't eat. So one thing that I tried to do things more so in moderation, like some of the things that I did, like if I wanted some fries, I made sure that throughout the week I did everything right that I was supposed to do so that I could enjoy the fries, because you do feel it when you go for treatment. Like, when you haven't done what you were supposed to, your treatment is a lot harder. So that helps, one, with kind of getting your mind right. Like, I'm not doing that again. That cramping was horrible. I'm never doing that again. But it was a slow process of just slowly. So like transitioning from beef to turkey, And so we started making, like, if we were going to have spaghetti or something like that, just, switching to turkey instead. And so then after a while, that became an acquired taste that when I had the beef, I was like, oh, it's not the same, So then we slowly transitioned to that, eating white meat instead of dark meat, just for chicken. So making minor adjustments that were a little bit more palatable than just cold turkey saying, okay, I'm not doing this. And I would say too, like, not cutting everything out. Sometimes when we want to go on a diet, or even for the Reno diet, it's kind of like, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do it. And it's a whole bunch of can'ts. And then you just feel defeated. Like, I'll never be able to do that. And so for me, the mind shift was, you can still enjoy some of the things that you liked, just not to the same degree, which you shouldn't be doing anyway. You shouldn't be doing fries in excess anyway. And so I did have to be prayerful in that, like, God helped me change my taste buds, because I really like this. I really want this. But it started with just slow changes, like, once a month, treat yourself to fries. But the rest of the time, you're going to get something else. You're going to eat some carrots, or something to that degree. So it was a process, but your body does start to come in alignment with your mind once you set your mind to it, but you just have to continue to do it. So once we switched over to turkey, we continued using turkey. And so then that became the only thing I really wanted, because that's what my body had gotten used to. And so when you talk about the mind and the body, it really is making that decision that I'm going to at least try it. At least try it, because sometimes we won't even try it. It's like, no, this is what I like. This is what I want to eat. So that's all I'm eating. But when you try it and you switch things up and you continue doing it, just continue practicing it, like with any habit, it then becomes. And so now I eat beef every now and again, because I know sometimes I can tell in my levels when I need a good piece of lean meat. But now I don't have a craving for it, because I don't do it regularly. And so it starts small. I always tell people, start small. Don't look at this big picture of, I can't do this, I can't do this. Start with something small. And even if that means, if you're a soda drinker and you drink sodas every day, so maybe you start by doing, instead of 5 days a week, we start with doing 3 days. And then, you just kind of go from there. It's easier to do a slow and gradual transition than just cold turkey. Some people can do cold turkey. I've seen that done, but for most people, just some gradual things, replacing something. When you get diagnosed, they automatically tell you, you can't do this, you can't eat this, take this out of your diet. And that's very overwhelming. Like, especially if you've spent the last 50 or 60 years of your life eating that way. Like, and so I always just say, start small. What is something that's going to cause your potassium to be very high that you did before that you're doing now? And let's start with something like that would really have a tremendous impact on your health and impact your health negatively.
Great. And I would say have those conversations with the dietitian, nutritionist that's there if you're going to an actual center. I know where my mom goes, they have one right there on site. It goes back to that support, utilize the people that are there that have the knowledge, the doctors, the nephrologists, the director, I would say the dietitian, nutritionist. If you get stumped, because I think that's what happens a lot of times. We're, like you said, we're 50, 60, 70 years old and been eating a certain way all of our lives. And then boom, all of a sudden we have to make these changes. It can be rocky. It can be rough.
Yes. And having accountability. So like, I know you all are probably accountability for your mom. And in my case, if someone was making something like, wait, can you have this? So having that accountability system in place is good as well, just to help keep you on track and to make you think twice about what you're eating.
And so we're going to reset the room one more time as we're coming down that closing of this, but there's one important topic. We're talking to Sharron, and we're talking about, this is National Kidney Disease Awareness Month, and we're just trying to educate people that your temple, God gave us this temple to take care of and maintain, to do the calling, the purpose that He has placed before us. And one of the things that we mentioned in those numbers was that there's 100,000 people on a kidney transplant list.
Yes.
And so going into that, tell us about that journey. And then what advice would you give to those who have undergone a transplant?
Mm-hmm.
So our transplant journey, it was a roller coaster ride. My sister got tested and she was a match. And so we were looking forward to our surgery. And the week before, 2 weeks before our surgery, I ended up developing shingles. So my surgery was supposed to be November of 2012. And I was thinking, great, I'd only been on dialysis for a few months because I started in June. And here I get shingles 2 weeks before the surgery. So it had to be canceled. And then at one point, my sister's hemoglobin levels, which have always been borderline, they begin to question her levels. And one thing I will say, if you decide to be tested to be a kidney donor, you will know anything that is wrong with you because they do a battery of tests to make sure that you're a candidate for it, because they want to make sure they're preserving your life as well. And if you're not in a position to give, then you'll know, because they do every test you can think of. You go through psychological evaluations as well. So you meet with a psychiatrist just to make sure that mentally you're not being coerced to do this and that this is something you really want to do. Even when we would go, they said, you'd be surprised. People have changed their mind the day of being wheeled back to the operating room to give their kidney, and they changed their mind. And so it can be an emotional roller coaster. And for us, I was excited about that first date. And then we ended up setting a second date. And 2 weeks before that surgery, the board decided not to let us go forward with the surgery. We were devastated. We were just like, why would you have us come this far to do? But they were very adamant about protecting my sister's health, which is very understandable. And so she ended up getting iron infusions. Long story short, she ended up getting 2 bone marrow biopsies to prove that there was nothing going on with her blood. As you know, those are bone marrow biopsies is one of the most painful biopsies that you can get. But in her mind, she was determined that she wanted to be my donor. And she has her story too, that, is very powerful about how she even came to that realization. So we ended up having our surgery on the 5th date that they had given us. And so by then it was a year and almost 2 years of me being on dialysis before we actually got to the operating table. And so when it comes to being evaluated for transplants, it's important to know that you can list on multiple hospitals. So you can be listed in 3 or 4 or 5 hospitals if you want to increase your chances if you are on a waiting list. Living donation, of course, is the best option because it will shrink the time for you if you have someone that's willing to come forward to get tested. The donor goes through a battery of tests. Like I said, if you have anything wrong with you, you'll know through all the tests that they give you, which can be good. I have a friend that did that, and she realized that she had some things going on with her hemoglobin. She came forward to be a kidney donor to someone, and through all of the tests that she had done, she found out some things that were going on in her body that she had to address. And had she not done that, she probably wouldn't have paid attention to it. And so we had our surgery on December 2nd of 2013. It was a success. God was there. We were a perfect match. So there's 6 antigens that they do what's called tissue matching to see how well and how compatible the kidneys are. And all 6 of our antigens matched up. So that was a blessing in itself. People in the hospital were so excited, like, you're the sisters with the perfect match. Like, that's so great. And so, but I knew that was only God. Only God could orchestrate our journey the way that he did. And so for those that are living with a transplant and those that are on your way to a transplant, my biggest advice would be to keep going. There may be some no's that you get in the process, and we didn't stop with the first no. We could have, and I could have probably still been on dialysis with being an O positive blood type. For someone that's O positive, you have a longer wait because you can only receive from an O. Whereas though, we're a universal donor, but we're not a universal recipient. And so for those that are waiting, don't stop at the first no. You may have to go somewhere else, and different hospitals have different levels and limitations. And so I know some hospitals may say a person is overweight, where they may go to another one and they're like, no, you're fine. So don't stop at the no. If you're living with a transplant, take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. Be mindful and aware of how you feel. And if you feel that something is off, there are a lot of tests out there that you can get to check your kidney functions and to see where your kidneys are, to be sure that you can catch it before you go into rejection. And so their CareDx, they have what they call a test. It's called AlloSure. And it's a test that you can do before you go to the biopsy. Because sometimes, a lot of times, hospitals want to go right to the biopsy to see if you're having a rejection. But there are other tests out there now. Thank God for research and innovations that are out there that you can do to see where your kidney function is. And there are therapies too that you can take to slow the rejection down.
What a ball full of wisdom and knowledge, Sharron. I mean, we can go on and on and on. I know we're going to have you come back on and probably bring your sister too, but I still have some more questions I want to ask. Through this journey, I mean, your journey of ups and downs and highs and lows, and, your faith level, and just God being there every step of the way, holding your hand, going through it. Can you tell us about your nonprofit organization that you have successfully started?
Sure. Kindness for Kidneys is God's vision, really. And I remind him of it daily, like, this is your vision, God. What are we doing here? Okay. But no, I like I said, I would sit in the dialysis chair and just look around me, and I knew there was something that I was supposed to do. I just knew that there's no way, God, that you'd have me in the situation and I get my transplant and I just go on with life and not turn around and reach back for those that are going to come behind me and go through this. And so that's how Kindness for Kidneys was born on December 2nd, 2018, which was the 5-year anniversary of our kidney transplant. We launched Kindness for Kidneys, and our goals are to educate. Education is huge. It's something that, if, again, we perish for lack of knowledge. And so it's so important to be educated about what you're going through. If you have family history, all of that is so important. Encouragement, as we've talked about, depression, your mindset, all of that comes into play when you get this diagnosis. And so we want to be able to provide encouragement to those that are dealing with kidney disease. And then empowering you to be your biggest advocate, giving you the information and the tools that you need to be a participant in your healthcare. It's vital that you participate in your own rescue. And so it's not left up to someone else to come along and make something happen. You have to be a participant in your rescue. And so those are our 3 E's, our 3 tenets of everything that we do center around that. And so we provide support groups. We started, and I thank God that your family was able to come to our very first meeting, March 8th, 2020. And then, as we know, everything shut down the very next week. So we've transitioned to doing things virtually. We have support groups the second Sunday of every month at 3:30 on Zoom. And it's just a good time to come together to learn information, to encourage each other, and to go out and help other people. We also provide Christmas packages in the summer. The last 2 years, we've had to do meals just because of COVID, but we're hoping to get back to doing some of the packages and actually being able to lay our eyes on warriors as they're coming in and out around Christmas. For me, Christmas hit a lot differently when I was sitting in a dialysis chair, even just different holidays, period, because you don't know how you're going to feel. I feel like because you're already reflecting during that time, most people reflect during the holiday time because you're still and you're more relaxed. And so that's a time where you really go inside and you think of your life and where you are and just all of those things. And so it was important to me to give back during the holiday time because I know that can be a difficult time for so many people. We do host informal kidney conversations with families. So if it's a family, maybe their loved one is newly diagnosed and they just want to learn more and maybe hear from my sister and I's story, we share with them about organ donation, about dialysis, about what to expect with their loved one. I always tell people you go through a grieving process when you're diagnosed with kidney disease. And I would even venture to say that could be for anything, where you have to eventually come to a place of acceptance. But many people are like, they don't want to talk, they don't want to do this. They're in the denial stage at that point. And so just giving even the caregivers that encouragement that, don't give up on them. Just be there to be a listening ear when they're ready to talk, when they're ready to be a part of this journey. Stand in the gap for them. We have some people that come to our support group meetings who their loved one we've never even met, but they're standing in the gap for their loved one and they're getting the information they need as a caregiver. And so it's about, to me, it's about empowering the village, not just the warrior, because many times the village has it harder than the warrior. And so we have to empower the village so that they can hold the arms up of the warrior as they walk through the journey. We have some other things that are on the horizon that we're very excited about around education that we're working on, and I think will be very beneficial to people that are currently on dialysis or getting ready to start dialysis. And so I'm hoping to be able to share that the next time that I come back. I really believe that this is going to impact this space in a great way because of just how we're packaging it and the downloads that God has given me about it. I really believe that it's going to change the narrative, especially in our community, in our African American community. And so yeah, that's where we are right now. We're 3 years in, and glory to God for all of it. I'm like, God, this is your vision. I honestly didn't think that it would move as quickly as it has, but I'm grateful that I get to be a part of it. And so I know God is going to use it. I always say that I feel like Kindness for Kidneys is a decoy. Everything that we do and our desire, the people on our board, is to point people back to Christ. And this allows us to reach a large amount of people that maybe wouldn't encounter Christ in other ways. And I'm not saying everyone does. There are a lot of believers that have kidney disease, but Kindness for Kidneys is the catalyst to get us to the heart of people and to share the love of. So anytime we do anything, whether like the meals, we're praying for the driver that's bringing the meals. We're praying for the people that are packaging the meals. This would be a special project for anyone that touches it, and that they would feel the tangible love of God. They may not be able to explain it, but because we prayed and declared it, that anyone that's involved in this in any capacity, whether it's the center, whether it's the patient, that when they're touching these meals, it's bigger than just a meal. It's that they would experience a change on the inside. And so I always say that the Kindness for Kidneys is really the decoy, but it's really about sharing the love and being a light in the community.
Wow. Yes, I will say, I'm trying not to tear up again, but I will say, I know for a fact what you're saying. We can attest to that because, like you said, it's not about the meals or the lotions, but I know when my mom received those gifts, it lights her up. Her spirit just is uplifted. It's a change. And I know it's more than just the tangible, but like you said, it's what's behind it. The prayer, those that, you all are praying for that driver or that recipient or whatever the case may be. And I'm like I said, I'm trying not to tear up. Is there anything that you would like in closing, anything that you would like to share with our podcast listeners? You feel led in your spirit or your heart as we end today.
First, I want to thank you all for this platform. I believe that this platform is bigger than probably the both of you imagine it to be. And so I'm grateful for this opportunity to be able to participate in platform. And I just pray an extra special blessing on your work because it's so important right now in the day that we're living in. For those that are listening, I just want to encourage you to walk out what God has placed on your heart to do. There's some dreams and visions that are on the inside that have yet to be tapped into. And so this is the hour to do it. This is the time that God is calling us to uncharted territory. And so it's so important that we do it now. I just sense that there's some dreams and visions that are on the hearts of people that could literally change so many different circles of influence, that this is the time to step out and do the things that God is laying on your heart. We can no longer be bound to this world system. In order to survive in the days that are coming, we have to live from the kingdom of heaven. And so if I can leave you with anything, it's God is making us very uncomfortable in certain places because it's time for us to step out into what he's calling us to do. And it's paramount in the days that are coming and the things that he's going to do in the days that are coming. And so I would leave that as my final word, is that it's time. It's so time to, do those unimaginable things that you know it's in your heart to do, but you just haven't put feet to the ground to do it. It is time to do it. There's shifts taking place in the atmosphere, and God is setting things up for the end times. Not saying that we're living in the end time, like it's going to end tomorrow, but we're inching closer. And I think he's divinely orchestrating and creating communities like yours that you have here. He's strategically creating communities for us to usher in his presence. And so it's time to step out. It's time, if I don't leave anything else, whatever it is that God is laying on your heart to do it. Do it.
That's a prophetic word that you just gave.
Yes, it is.
Definitely a prophetic word.
Yes,
Because I was gonna say, Sharron, just pray us out, but that was it.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. That was the prayer. That was the prophetic word right there. Wow.
Praise God.
Yeah, I just we can't thank you enough for, the wisdom and just your spirit and just everything on this platform today. I just feel the Spirit of God just hovering here. And I know he's hovering at your home, and I know he's hovering to those that are listening, whether they're commuting or just at home, listening to us. And we can't thank you and bless God enough for you for sharing your testimony, your journey. I know it's going to bless so many others, just as it has blessed us.
Yeah, yep, definitely. And what's the website for anybody who wants to connect with you and your organization to find out more information or even help out?
Donations or anything like that.
Volunteer.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
It's Kindness for Kidneys. So KINDNESSFOR, and then kidneys, KIDNEYS.org. So www.kindnessforkidneys.org.
Yes.
Awesome.
And then Kindness for Kidneys on all social media platforms as well.
Great.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I think that prophetic word was our prayer and our closing and everything. Don't forget, you can always continue to check in, think about it Thursdays. Every Thursdays, we'll bring some special guests and we're focusing this month on taking care of the temple, which is our temple that God has given us. And so we look forward to listening to us next week and the future weeks to come. And may God bless you. May God keep you. May his face shine upon you. Let his grace just continue to love over you unconditionally. Yes. Continue to do the great works and do God's will. Until next time we meet, peace and blessings to all of you.
Amen.
Joining us on Stronger Together, Closer to God podcast. Please continue to join us weekly as we share godly wisdom and advice to you. If you have any prayer requests or would like to sign up for a free 30-minute consultation with us, drop us a line at s2c2gpodcast@gmail.com. And if you like what you're hearing, feel free to partner with us by clicking on the Partners tab on the website. The more you give, the more we can spread the word and help us to reach our vision of bringing 1 million married couples stronger together, closer to God. Feel free to check us out on our website at s2c2gministry.com. Until next time, peace and blessings to all of you.